Hey, good morning, church. For everyone in here that does not know me, my name's Riley Pickrel, and that was a very smooth transition, Kyle. Thank you for taking the guitar from me. Good morning. Always honored to be able to preach. If you don't know me, again, my name is Riley Pickrel, and it's been a great morning of worship, actually. Given the technical difficulties, it's been phenomenal so far. I hope everyone's been having a great morning. Also, I can't believe this Thursday is Thanksgiving. It's a holiday weekend coming up. I can't wait for the food. And I will say, before we do dive into the lesson this morning, the party was started a little bit early on Friday when the Spanish-speaking ministry held a party over at their house where there was dancing and food and a bonfire outside. And also, with there being a dance floor there, if you don't know me, if you're ever with me and there's a dance floor somewhere, you'll learn that when I enter it, my body betrays me. And my hips don't lie. They don't move at all. So which is funny. I'm not a very expressive person, but if you would have known me about 8 years ago, what's kind of crazy, if you believe it, I'm about 10 times of a better dancer now today than I was then. So that doesn't sound, it is crazy. It's very hard to believe. But this morning, we're going to a story where we do encounter somebody who is very expressive, who with his body and with his emotion expresses himself in a very profound and extraordinary way. We're going to a story of the healing of the 10 lepers. So if you guys do want to be going to your Bibles, please be turning over to Luke 17. We're going to be starting in verse 1. And today is very appropriate, the story, because the story really is about gratitude. It's about the heart of Thanksgiving and what true Thanksgiving and gratitude really is. I think we have a kind of a misunderstanding kind of in our world today of what gratitude is. Sometimes we can imagine it as just a mindset, as something that we kind of have in our mind, but true gratitude is an action. It is a sign to the world of what's actually going on and what we feel. It's something that does need action with it. So as we go to Luke 17, we're beginning in verse 11. And before we read, let's go to God and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, God, thank you for this morning, that God, even in spite of all the technical difficulties and things that slow service down, you're being praised. God, you are a God that truly deserves our praise. God, thank you for Jesus. Thank you for, Lord, opening up a way that we can be connected with you. Lord, in spite of our sin and in spite of us choosing to live a different way, and Father, thank you for opening it up, and we can be praising you here this morning. I do pray that you do work through the lesson. Please speak through me. Say what you want to say, Father, and I pray that your word truly amazes us and we hear what you want us to hear. God, we love you. We ask all this in your son's name. Amen. And as we get to verse 11 in Luke 17, I'm going to begin reading. And it says, "Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. And as he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him, and they stood at a distance and they called out in a loud voice, 'Jesus, Master, have pity on us.' And when he saw them, he said to them, 'Go, show yourself to the priest.' And as they went, they were cleansed." Let's stop there. Healing lepers was an important part of Jesus's ministry. If you kind of remember earlier in the gospel, when John the Baptist is kind of going through a crisis of faith, he's trying to figure out, is Jesus really the Messiah? Jesus sends back to him with a messenger. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have good news to preach. Healing lepers was actually one of the big major roles of Jesus to show his messiahship. Not many healers at this time were doing that. If you don't know, that leprosy was a very destructive disease. If you got leprosy, it kind of meant that your life from that point onward was never going to be the same. It was going to be forever changed. It's a skin disease. It wreaks permanent destruction on a person physically. There's scars, disfigurement, you lose limbs, you lose digits, all these kinds of things. And it has an effect on the body. That person will live with that forever, like for the rest of their life. Having leprosy put someone in a state also of uncleanness. So you have the physical effects of leprosy that people would have, but also there is definitely some emotional. Leviticus 13 says anyone that has a defiling disease, and this is just the law, this is what to do when somebody does have leprosy or some kind of skin disease, Now it says that anyone with this disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkempt, lower or cover the lower part of their face, and cry out unclean as long as they have the disease and remain unclean. So what kind of meant is that wherever you went, you actually had to shout out, which is what we see here. These guys kind of kept their distance and they shouted out to Jesus, unclean, or not unclean, but they kept their distance and they shouted out, Master. They had a very different response. Master, Master, have pity on us. But they were living out the law. They were keeping their distance. But being outside of a community when you had this disease absolutely would have had a huge effect. Talk about trauma, having to kind of live your life, always kind of remembering, like, I had to keep my distance from people. I had to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on here. You can never embrace your loved ones again, your kids, your parents, their professions, skills, and trades, things like that. Most of these things would have been all but almost impossible to continue doing. Now living in these leper communities, if you had the disease, you'd probably be dependent on people's giving. You couldn't really continue in your trade. You didn't have the freedom to go wherever. You couldn't go on late night runs to Wawa. You're outweighed or you were weighed down by this disease, and you're permanently, and it affects your body permanently. It's a huge thing. Now, I will say that leprosy can run its course, that according to law, if the person's disease stops spreading, they can be brought back into community. But the effects of it are permanent. The disfigurement, the effects on the body, it's something that it changes you forever, and there's really nothing you can do. Leprosy was a big deal. Leprosy it can be a great analogy, I think, for us, for what sin is. Sin is like leprosy. It's the most destructive force in our universe. It kills us spiritually. Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. When you sin, when we choose to cross God's boundaries of the way to live our lives, it's a death sentence. Your life will never be the same unless there's intervention. It leaves scars and regret. It steals life that God intends for us. Sin is all horrible. The worst of all, it severs relationships. Sin makes life really, really heavy and weird. And most importantly, the most important relationship it separates us from is with God. Isaiah 59, verse 1, but your iniquities have separated you from God. Your sins have hidden his face from you. Like leprosy, there's nothing we can do to actually change the effects of sin on our life, on our part. And this is where we find the lepers. The lepers in the story, they're trapped. They have really no hope. They kind of possess now the knowledge that their life has changed for the worst. From here on out, it's just hard and heavy. And then the story after this point starts to get really good. This is when it stops being depressing. Jesus says to them, go, show yourself to the priest. I do want to briefly mention, you can do this in your own study. Go read Leviticus 14, 1-7. The ceremony that Jesus was sending them to receive is kind of crazy because the Bible's full of Easter eggs that all point to Jesus in the Old Testament. The ceremony, let's just say, it included 2 birds, some wood, hyssop, and scarlet yarn, all mixed in the water. One bird was sacrificed and his blood was mixed in the water, and the other bird was dunked in the water and then set free. Like, pretty amazing what you find in the Old Testament. So I do encourage anyone to go and read that. But that's what he was sending them to receive. And then it says after he sent them, and as they went, they were cleansed. I can only imagine. There's many scenes in the Bible I wish I could just watch and be the fly on the wall and kind of see this. Because this is my opinion, but I have a feeling that they weren't just put in a state of cleanness again, but they were most likely probably completely restored. That any of the effects that leprosy had on them, they were probably like the day right before they got leprosy, completely restored, brand new, second life. And I really do wish I could have seen this. I kind of imagine the dialogue between these lepers. I imagine it being, man, as they're walking along to the priest, man, I got to be honest, fellas. I thought this guy was the Messiah. You know, he's asking us to go see the priest. I don't really understand. I can imagine leper number 2. Dude, you're preaching to the choir. That did not go the way I expected. I mean, look at us. Why is he sending us to the priest now? Doesn't he know the law? Like, doesn't he know we're going to get to the priest? And do you think he's going to declare us? Oh my gosh, like, You can imagine their effect is they didn't have mirrors. I kind of imagine that they would have saw the change in each other first. They would have noticed, what, your face. Oh my gosh, it's back. What in the world? It doesn't even look like you have leprosy. Guys, look, my hands. Now I can go back to my father's trade. I can provide for my family once again. I can go and lift up my son, enjoy the feeling of using my body once again. I wish I could watch something like that, but these men's lives were given back. They had a second chance. What they thought would have been impossible, never even, a possibility. Now they're given a whole new life from that point. When it comes to sin, I will say that there is a solution today. If you are someone who's visiting and you feel like you want to go deeper and you have questions, I do implore you, please pull someone aside. Kind of ask them, what is the gospel? What does the Bible say about forgiveness or a new life? Because that is all there. The Bible does include it. So I do encourage anyone who is visiting, study these things out, pull someone aside after service. But this is then where the story starts to get really good. And now to get kind of to the main point of the story, Luke 17, verse 15, it says, one of them, when he saw that he was healed, came back. Praising God in a loud voice, he threw himself at Jesus' feet and he thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise except this foreigner? And he said to them, rise and go, or said to him, rise and go, your faith has made you well. We see here a really great example of what true gratitude looks like. What we also see here is that true gratitude is rare. This is kind of like the first Christian survey ever taken. Jesus kind of figures out that 1 out of 10 lepers actually shows true gratitude. That is a joke. But the point does remain, true gratitude is something that not many people actually respond with when we do receive cleansing. Real gratitude, the guy, he came back. He was loud. He threw himself at Jesus' feet. He was expressive. He paid no attention to social decorum. And in every way, he just wanted to make it known that he was grateful to Jesus for the second chance. That was his only goal. Thanksgiving, gratitude, is truly just a characteristic, a tangible kind of expression of what's going on inside. It's revealed in our behavior. It shows that we truly understand, that we really perceive the gift that was given to us, that we get it. Real gratitude, it causes us to go out of our way, to look a little bit crazy at times, and to fall at Jesus' feet. We make choices not based on convenience when we're truly gracious, but on Jesus. We say things, we teach things, we invite people to things and into our homes, look a little crazy for Jesus. We humble ourselves before Jesus and his words and all, everything, because we've been given a new life. Returning to show thanks will cost each of us, well, one, the thought. We actually have to think about it and intensely go about thinking. It will cost us energy, time, changing plans, switching things around, being flexible. And oftentimes, frequently, it can cost us financially as well as we give. But we do this all because we know what we're grateful for. It's a second life, a whole new beginning, a second chance when there was absolutely no hope. That's a big deal. Again, this guy, the Samaritan, he understood it. Another really big part of the story that Luke highlights is that he was a Samaritan. If you don't know, Samaritans were essentially these distant cousins of Israel that you can read about the split in 2 Kings, but essentially they were Israelites that chose to mix with the people that were surrounding Israel. And over history, that led to a ton of bitterness and hate, and really just Samaritans and Jews, they hated each other. Luke goes out of his way to really point out that this man, he was a Samaritan. And it's a common pattern as we see in Luke. We'll see it with Zacchaeus, or we'll see it with the sinful woman, that oftentimes it's the worst in society, or the worst, or it's the foreigners or the most obviously sinful that tend to enter the kingdom and be the most demonstrative followers as we look through Luke. Here's what we see. And why is that the case? Because these people understand the gift. They understand what they have truly received. They're motivated by grace. And they saw their need for Jesus clearly. more clearly than maybe others. But true gratitude is really just an expression that we understand what the gift is we've been given. Authentic gratitude, it mirrors the gift, kind of like a mirror, which is my illustration. A good mirror is going to show you exactly what you put in front of it. If you put a small object in front of it, you're going to see a small object. If you put a large object, you're going to see it. A good mirror will reflect what's actually in front of it, what's truly there. Mirrors can't lie at all. This Thursday, I know I'm going to eat a lot of food. If I look in the mirror and my belly sticks out farther than normal, it's not because the mirror's tricking me. It's because I have eaten a ton of food, probably too much. I will say these days, I think I do practice a little more self-control than normal. But anything more when it comes to response to grace, to this gift we've been given, anything less or more normally doesn't work with gratitude. So if somebody gives you a big gift and there's a small response, what do we think? Or if you go out of your way to drive someone an hour and you don't get a thank you, it's like, how dare they? What in the world? Look what I did. Big gift and small response doesn't work. Same with a small gift and a really big response. If somebody hands you a glass of water and you're like, I will never forget this deed, and you're very intently gazing, that doesn't work either. Gratitude must match the gift. It's like a mirror. Faulty perspectives or a bad mirror is typically where we find these people who aren't the Samaritan or aren't the sinful woman, these other people who look on judgmentally, is because the perspective's off. They have a small gift in their mindset. But what's true, when we've been forgiven of sin, it's like there can never be a bigger gift. That's incredible. Jesus in the story of the sinful woman, when he tells Simon the story, who was a Pharisee, who was kind of looking judgmentally, Jesus, if you really knew this woman that you were hanging out with that is here, you'd be acting different. If you were a real prophet, and he tells the story of a guy who, or two men who owed money, one of them a very large debt, one of them a very small debt, forgives them both. Who loves them more? The one with the larger debt. Jesus says, whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Our response to grace is huge. It's massive when we understand the gift that's given, when we practice real gratitude. Oftentimes, I think that we can be focused on other things. We can be focused on people. That can be the thing that motivates our grace, which is a horrible thing to focus on. It's like, what a low standard, looking at other people. God is our standard. We want 100%, not 3% holiness as other people compared to 2%. It's 100%. I think oftentimes we can look there or look at our image. How are those people looking at us? Clothes or personality or success or anything like that. Oftentimes I think we can allow our focus to be there rather than being motivated by really the big gift. What we see from these other lepers that, like I said before, there was a 1 in 10 response that only one of these 10 lepers actually came back. And what it shows is that true gratitude can be rare. It can be something that we don't see normally wherever we go. Where were the other 9? What were they doing? Like, we don't actually know. Obviously, the story doesn't really go into where were the other 9. You can imagine maybe, out of sight, out of mind. They didn't really see Jesus and they got distracted. I get distracted all the time. If I've ever been in fellowship and I'm talking to you and then I go somewhere else just randomly, I'm sorry if I've ever done that. I easily get distracted. The other 8 weren't going. Maybe you're looking around and the one Samaritan goes back to Jesus, but the other guys weren't. Maybe it was just groupthink. And they're like, oh man, he's going, but nobody else is going. Do we really need to go? Or maybe he's just really good at gratitude. He's a gratitude expert. We'll let him go say thank you for us to Jesus. I think that can be an easy one we fall into, the spectator kind of religion. We kind of just watch someone else do it when we know that we should also maybe be doing it. Maybe they were embarrassed. This is the one I would hate to imagine that after having leprosy and living with the Samaritan all these years, maybe after being healed, they're like, oh, man, maybe the pride came back. Like, I don't want to be seen with him. I don't want to go with that Samaritan. That would be truly awful if that was really their response after being cleansed. I think it can be a common fact in churches that for every one disciple that you do see who's on fire, or one Christian who claims to be following Jesus, you'll find 9 of them who tend to spectate. or 9 that are going to be missing. I think the question is very applicable for us today. Where are the 9? What happened? I think every Thanksgiving back home, growing up, we always, we could expect really good food, all my family to be there because it was a big event. But then we'd also, every year, somebody had like car problems. I don't know why. Or there was some tractor or some vehicle that needed repaired. So after lunch, what would typically happen is me and my uncles, and then all the older cousins who just wanted to go outside, we'd all go out. What would happen is one of the uncles would actually be doing the work on the car, and we just all kind of stand around and just that kind of classic watching them, what they're doing under the hood. This can be us very easily. I think the question's good. Which are you? Of the 10% or the 90%, which do you fall? I think if you were to play out your last week or your last month or the last year, like a movie, where do you think you would fall? Would you be crossing every line, taking every opportunity to give thanks through your life? Or would you be the spectating 90, letting convenience and security or fear actually drive your response, like we see in the other 9? Do you go out of your way to meet people across ministries, or stick to the people that you're typically comfortable, or you talk to the most? This is an easy one for me. I think I can easily also get caught up serving, and I forget that, like, wait, we're doing this all so that God can actually find his way into people's hearts. And I'm like, that's what we're here for. It's so easy to get caught up in the serving. When we're actually being called to go shake someone new's hand, go meet them. If God's going to enter, we got to meet them first. If God's going to make an impact. Are you loud about your faith? I think not in volume. I'm not loud by any means. Well, compared to Kurt, maybe he's very loud. But are you loud about your faith? And not just in volume, but does the world know what God's done for you? Does your gratitude truly show and reflect to the world? Which are you, of the 9 or like the 1? I think that God really does love it when we go out of our way, get uncomfortable, or do something that we don't really feel naturally good at. It doesn't come natural to us. I think that expression of gratitude, God is all about that. A few weeks ago, we did a midweek. This is actually, it's turning into one of my favorite midweeks ever. But we did a midweek where we practiced using Google Translate. And we had everybody who was normally, grew up speaking English and then speaking Spanish. We had everybody intermingle and connect, which was an amazing idea, and use Google Translate to essentially practice actually communicating and fellowshipping across ministries. And I got to be honest, you might not know this about me. I don't speak Spanish. None at all. I know, crazy. And to be honest, it was like, I think a lot of times it can be so tempting for me to disregard or avoid long conversations with someone that I know it's going to take a lot more extra effort to communicate, to really get my points across, to understand them. Oh, it's so easy to avoid those conversations. And it is actually convicting to me that most of our services, this is the normal. Most people who speak Spanish, our services are in English. Every week is like that. It can be very difficult. And I gotta say that midweek, I was a little intimidated. I was nervous. I was like, oh man, is this going to be like a weird, awkward conversation? Is it going to end up just like not being very fruitful? And it's like, oh, I can't really get across what I'm trying to say. And no, it didn't end like that. It was phenomenal. It was actually one of the most fun conversations I've ever had. Also, Google Translate is amazing. It is a great tool. But it was amazing. Jesus went out of his way when he chose to be our substitute on the cross so we could be united with God. Our response to gratitude is that we're going to go out of our way to make sure that we're united as well, united with everybody. We know if it's uncomfortable, if it's across the language barrier, that's an expression of gratitude. Whatever it takes, I'm going to go out of my way to show I'm grateful for what God has done, no matter what happens. Real gratitude, it causes us to live lives that result in action. Gratitude can never be a state of mind. It's only a response to what we've already received. The Samaritan, I kind of imagine, maybe felt insecure returning. Like maybe he felt like Jesus, obviously is someone special. It's like he did this for me. Maybe I should just go. Or I'm a Samaritan. He's a true Jew. I can imagine the insecurity would have been high for him, the fear. Gratitude causes us to live, serve, share boldly, pay forward what we've been given in spite of insecurity or not feeling like we could really do it naturally. I think kind of closing, I think let's go into the holiday week with a real mission to be truly gratitude, to let the gratitude overflow, remembering where we used to be, the healing God's brought us, and let's imitate the overflowing gratitude that's displayed by the Samaritan that used to be formerly known as a leper. But with that, it's the end of the lesson. Singers can come up for one last song before we close.